Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 26th of October of 2024. Today we have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And the most important and interesting information is coming from the area between the town of Velika Novoselovka and the city of Selydove. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours along the entire line of combat contact, we have a lots of territories changes, and as you can see, the Russians managed to capture the significant positions of the armed force of Ukraine, including several towns in this direction. So we can make a conclusion based on all these reports and updates that the Russians launched full-scale offensive operation in this direction with the purpose to break through the Ukraine defense belt, to capture the significant number of towns and cities and the villages, to defeat the Ukrainians, and then even to move further in the western direction towards the river of Dnipro. Now let's discuss everything in details, and first we're going to talk about the southern direction. Yesterday in the evening, on the 25th of October, we start receiving updates about Russian offensive operation, about several Russian offensive operations in the direction of the village by the name of Shakhtarska. The pro-Ukrainian sources are saying that there were two attempts to attack, and both attempts were successful. The Russians managed both to break through the Ukraine defense belt and to enter the southern part of the village of Shakhtarska itself. The Ukrainians were trying to slow down the Russians. The Ukrainians managed to destroy several Russian vehicles and even to force the Russians to fall back. And all these reports, all these updates about Russian offensives we got yesterday on the 25th of October. As for the 26th of October, during the day we haven't received anything that confirm additional Russian progress, which is very weird and very interesting. During the day we got the significant number of videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in the fields between the villages of Shakhtarska, Yasnaya Polina, and the town of Velika Novoselovka. Maybe the Russians during those attacks managed to discover the significant number of Ukrainian positions, and during the day they were bombing and destroying them, trying to finish the cleanup operation. So anyway, let's wait for additional updates because the situation is very interesting, and this is very important direction, and we will discuss once again this direction in the second part of the video. Summarizing everything, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions, it's obviously, and the most important, currently the Russians are fighting for the territory that is located inside of this red line. We're talking about different fields, fortifications, dense network of the fortifications, the village of Shakhtarska itself, and the village of Yasnaya Polyana. Obviously, this is the primary target of the armed force of Russian Federation for the next few days, and if the Russians are able to take this territory under complete control, this will bring the Russians the significant benefits that will allow them to finish another offensive operation that we will discuss in the second part of the video. Now let's talk about the village of Bohoyavlenka. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians conducted several attacks in the direction of the settlement, and as a result of offensives, the Russians managed first of all to take under control the stronghold in the southern direction of the village of Bohoyavlenka, and another Russian group of forces managed to enter the farms in the western part. And these reports were provided us by different pro-Ukrainian sources. As for the videos, we have a lot of videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the village itself. Currently, it's very difficult to understand what exactly is happening in both these two villages like Shakhtarska and Bohoyavlenka, because once again, most of updates we received on the in the late evening of the 25th of October. During the 26th of October, we haven't received anything that can confirm additional Russian progress. The situation is completely covered with the fog of war. Obviously, the Russians are attacking, but as for now, nobody knows for sure where exactly the edge Russian positions. Anyway, summarizing everything that we received from different mappers and different military experts, we can make a conclusion that currently the Russians are trying to take under control the territory that is located inside of this red line. We're talking about the village of Bohoyavlenka itself, this dense network of the fortifications, and the farms to the west of Bohoyavlenka. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that the Russians are trying to take in pincers the Ukrainian positions in Novoukrayinka. If the Russians are able to finish these two both offensives successfully, the Ukrainians most likely would be forced to fall back towards the river of Sukhi Yali. So this is the river that Ukrainians will try to take positions, to hold positions before further Russian advance in the northern direction. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kurakhove direction. During the previous 24 hours, we got a lot of icons from this territory, and as you can see, the most of the icons are the icons with the Russian flag, with the flag which confirms additional Russian progress. In the morning, we got report that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Oleksandropil. Later, we got the video that confirms this progress. In this video, we can see the Russian soldier that was moving through the village of Oleksandropil, trying to find a place, the best place to raise the Russian flag. And when he found the place, he raised the flag of Russian Federation. Few hours later, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation also confirmed this information, that as a result of clashes, the group of forces south managed to take the village of Oleksandropil under complete control. Obviously, the significant progress of the armed force of Russian Federation, which opens the second front line for the Ukrainians that are located in the town of Kurakhove. Now let's move further to the village, to the town of Hirnyk, and as you can see, we have adjusted the map, and as you can see, the town of Hirnyk was completely captured by the Russians. There are just several blocks in the south and in the southwestern part that are located on the border with the settlement of Kurakhove. As for the town itself, during the previous 24 hours, we got the video that was published by the 114th Motorized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Russian Federation, and this is the brigade, by the way, that a year ago took control over the Avdiivka landfill. So most of the towns and the settlements in the Pokrovsk direction were captured by this 114th Brigade, and the town of Hirnyk also is in the list of victories of this brigade. In this video, we can see several Russian attacks on Ukrainian positions. It's just a lot of episodes of how the Russians were storming the town of Hirnyk. We have episodes with a significant number of prisoners of war that this brigade managed to capture. And in the final part of the video, we can see four Russian soldiers that raised the sign of victory above the building in the central part of the settlement. So, of course, the building was geolocated. This is exactly the building and the place where the Russians raised the flag, and based on this video we have adjusted the northern part of Hirnyk and the area to the northeast of Hirnyk under complete Russian control. As for different mappers, during the day we got lots of updates that the Russians took under control the fields between Zhelana, Druga, Zaryan and Hirnyk itself. According to neutral mappers, we got lots of reports that the Russians took under control first the eastern part of Hirnyk, and later, right before we start making the video, we got additional report that the Russians managed to take the town of Hirnyk completely. So this is the situation by the end of the 26th of October, and this is the situation at the beginning by the end of the 25th of October. So as you can see, by the end of the 25th of October, there were reports that Ukrainians still had their positions in the eastern part of the settlement and in the southern part. But as for the end of the 26th of October, the Ukrainians lost everything. Now let's move further in the western direction. According to different mappers, the Russians improved their positions in the vicinity of the village by the name of Selydove. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians moved further in the southern direction, and currently the Russians are trying to reach this defense belt, this dense network of the fortification, with the purpose to cut in cauldron the Ukrainian forces that are still located on the territory of Kurakhove. So this is the progress on the ground during the previous 24 hours. So the Russians just managed to improve their positions in the eastern part of Selydove, and today the Russians managed to move even further in the southern direction. So the Russians still believe that they can encircle the Ukrainians to 1,000 to 3,000 of soldiers, and this upcoming night between the 26th and the 27th of October is the decisive night for the Ukrainian armed forces that are located in this agglomeration. Either the Ukrainians would retreat from this territory towards the village of Hyrnyk, or they would be caught in cauldron and would stay there forever. Now let's move a little bit further in direction of Tsukurina. During the previous 24 hours, we also have additional changes on the ground. The Russians managed to improve their positions and to answer the village of Novodmitrievka. This information was confirmed by some picture that was published by some Russian sources, and we have additional progress on the ground along the railways, also according to neutral mappers. And now we can see the entire picture. Once again, let's discuss these two operations together. Now we see that the Russians are trying to attack the Ukrainian positions from the southern direction, and now we see that the Russians are trying to attack and to move in the southern direction from the north. Basically, the main Russian goal is to take under complete control this territory, the territory between the town of Kurakhove, Konstantinopolska, Andreevka, Shevchenka, and Solntsevka. So this territory have the significant concentration of Ukrainian forces, and this is exactly what the Russians are trying to attack and to take under control. So if, as for the southern direction, we understand the Russian goals and what exactly they're planning to do, or it will try to achieve by the end of the 2024, and the Russian goal is to reach these lines, so to take under control Shakhtarska, Novoukrainka, Bohoyavlenka, Maximovka, and to reach this yellow square with a significant concentration of Ukrainian forces. As for the northern direction, during the next few weeks, the Russians will try to do everything they can, but to take under control the settlements like Zarya, Solntsevka, Voznesenka, Novoselydovka, of course, the town of Kurakhove, and to connect their forces in the positions on the territory of Ostrovska. So if the Russians are able to complete these both operations during the next few weeks, then the Ukrainians that are currently located in this artillery Kurakhove pocket would be encircled, and the Russians will create the biggest cauldron ever since the beginning of the special military operation. The distance between possible Russian positions, let's say on the territory of the village by the name of Solntsevka, and Russian positions in the northern part of Maximovka, would be less than 17 kilometers. The Ukrainians will have just few evacuation or support roads that goes from Kurakhove itself in the western direction. So I believe that during the next 1, 2, 3 months, the Russians will try to take this territory under complete control, because if the Russians are able to take these territories under their complete control, then Ukrainians would be forced to fall back very far in the western direction, and nobody knows for sure where exactly the Ukrainians would be able to stop and to slow down the Russians. And the Russians, of course, would continue their offensive also in the western direction, with the purpose to encircle Gulyai-Polye, Orekhov, and to reach the river of Dnipro. Now let's move further and let's talk about the city of Selydove, where the clashes and the battle for the settlement is entering the final phase. During the previous 24 hours, we have a lot of changes on the ground. The Russians managed to secure completely the northern part of the settlement. This information was confirmed by different neutral mappers, and the Russians managed to take under control the central part of the settlement itself. We have the photo with the building where the Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group or Russian forces managed to raise the flag. So this is exactly the building where the Russians raised the Russian flag. Based on this photo, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. The southern direction, Russians also managed to secure the southern part completely. The Ukrainians still control just around 15 or 20% of the settlement, but this night, between the 26th of October and the 27th of October, the Ukrainians most likely will decide to evacuate their personnel completely, to save their soldiers and to save their assets, and to try to slow down the Russians somewhere further in the western direction. Furthermore, right before we start making the video, some pro-Russian sources reported that this upcoming night, most likely the Russians will finish the clearing operation of the village by the name of Vishnyovo. So the battle for this settlement is about to be finished as well. As we can see, the Russians during the previous 3 weeks managed to achieve the significant results. The Ukrainians haven't managed to stabilize the line of combat contact. Furthermore, we continue receiving updates about worsening the situation for the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk area. The Ukrainians can't evacuate personnel from this territory, and according to information we have, the Russians are planning to send the Korean forces here. Today we got additional report that by Monday of October, by the next Monday, the Russians are going to redeploy up to 5,000 Korean soldiers, and probably on Tuesday on the 28th of October, the Russians will begin the third stage of the Kursk counter-offensive operation, including the use of these Korean forces with the purpose to destroy the Ukrainian soldiers there. We have report that the territory in the Kursk Kursk region, where about 2,000 Ukrainian troops are blocked, is 6 by 15 kilometers. And we are talking about this part. The Russians still haven't destroyed this pocket. They're waiting for reinforcements to begin this operation. And very likely the Ukrainians would be completely defeated in this territory. And if this happens, there are very high chances, and most likely the Russians will continue their offensive operation further on the territory of Ukraine with the purpose to attack the city of Sumy. So the most important part, we are entering the most important part of the special military operation. I believe that Zelensky himself and his authorities and his people don't know for sure how to stop and to slow down the Russians. They're searching for additional help. They're waiting when the president elections in the United States of America are going to be finished, because they hope that Kamala Harris is going to win these elections, and then most likely they will continue receiving funds and additional military help to fight with the Russians. But something tells me that the time is not enough for the Ukrainians, and during the next few months they can lose the critical let's say number of strategical points, and it will be very difficult for them to turn everything back. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.